Thank you everyone for joining us today. I am Eric Howe. I am the director of the Lake Champlain Basin Program and the Champlain Valley National Heritage Partnership. We are here today to release the State of the Lake Report for Lake Champlain, which is a report on the status of several different indicators on the condition of the lake. This is a report that we release about every 3 years. Today, we're releasing it digitally. It is available for download from the Basin Program's website, and Ryan will be dropping a link into the chat for you to access the report if you haven't already. And hard copies for the report will be available for distribution next month. We are obviously doing this over Zoom today. We are using Zoom's webinar format, which means that all participants or attendees will be muted until the presentations are over. Then you can unmute your microphone to ask questions. Please be aware that today's webinar is being recorded and will be available on the Basin Program's website. Before we get into the report, I'd like to welcome a few special guests to share a few words. First, I'd like to introduce U.S. Senator Patrick Leahy of Vermont. He has pre-recorded a video that we will play for you now. Ryan?
Hi, Marcel and I want to congratulate all of you on the release of the 2021 State of the Lake Report. And I think we speak on behalf of all Vermonters who cherish our great lake. We thank you for your hard work and your dedication to protecting Lake Champlain. The release of a new State of the Lake Report is always so greatly anticipated by everybody, lake advocates, public officials, legislators, and the media. It's actually become the go-to source of information about Lake Champlain. Certainly is for me and for my staff, and for everyone who works for a cleaner, better lake. Now, you all know, better than anybody, Lake Champlain's a very complex and constantly changing ecosystem. Very little about our lake is simple. In fact, very little is easily explained. But we need up-to-date, trustworthy, concise, practical, and especially understandable information about the lake. Can we swim in the lake? Can we drink the lake water that comes from our taps? Can we eat the fish that we catch? Our investments of scarce resources in cleaning up have an impact. And what are the trends we should be tracking? Well, thanks to the State of the Lake Report, it addresses these questions and more. Now, I know that hundreds of hours have been spent putting together this document to pack it with scientific information, but also keeping it accessible and especially straightforward. So thank you to Eric and the whole team at the Lake Champlain Basin Program. You spend months of creative and painstaking work. And your communications and technical teams do so well, and it comes through in the document. And many volunteers, those with abundant expertise and passion for our prized resource, have also contributed to the State of the Lake Report in their roles as members of the Basin Program Advisory Committee. And I want to thank you. Some of you know that 2 weeks ago I met with EPA Administrator Regan in my role as chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee. We're going over EPA's FY22 budget proposal. Now, as chairman, when I'm doing that, you know I have his attention. And so my first comment to the administrator was to thank him for the EPA's steadfast support for the Lake Champlain program, and to tell him I want that to continue. So let me take this opportunity to thank Deb Szaro. She's the acting region administrator, and the whole team in EPA Region 1. You have always stood up for the lake, and I've made darn sure that they know that in Washington. Look at your work. It's protected Lake Champlain. And as a result of all your efforts, the State of the Lake Report will continue to be where I look first. I'll look there for the information I need to explain to other senators and to President Biden why they should want to join me in protecting this very special Lake Champlain. So, as a Vermonter, I thank you. I thank you all.
All right. Thank you, Senator Leahy, for your dedication to the protection and the restoration of Lake Champlain, and of course, for your support for the Lake Champlain Basin Program. Next, I would like to welcome U.S. EPA Region 1 Acting Administrator, Deborah Szaro. Administrator Zarrow, please go ahead and unmute your microphone and turn on your camera. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. It's always hard to follow Senator Leahy, but I'm going to try to do it justice. Thank you to the Lake Champlain Basin Program for inviting me to speak today to celebrate the release of the State of the Lake Report. I'm Deb Szaro, the Acting Regional Administrator of EPA Region 1, which represents the 6 New England states. It's a pleasure for me to also share the virtual stage today with Walter Mugden, the Acting Regional Administrator for EPA Region 2. First, I'd like to thank the Vermont Congressional Delegation for their unwavering support of Lake Champlain restoration and protection efforts. Senator Leahy, as you all just heard, has been a staunch and longstanding supporter of all things Lake Champlain. And as the chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee, he has ensured that Lake Champlain funding remains a top priority. We're lucky to have Senator Sanders by our side as well, as he is one of 3 New England members of the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee, which touches not only Lake Champlain, but all aspects of EPA. Last, but certainly not least, I'd like to thank Congressman Welch, who has been a supporter of EPA's efforts throughout his career. I'd also like to thank our colleagues, Peter Walk, Commissioner of the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation, and Julie Moore, Secretary of the Agency of Natural Resources, with whom we work closely on all Vermont matters, but especially Lake Champlain. I also want to acknowledge and thank our many other partners in this effort to restore and protect Lake Champlain in the state of New York, the province of Quebec, and other federal agencies. A special thanks, of course, should be given to all the dedicated Lake Champlain Basin Program staff and their state and provincial agency staff and other program partners who are working on Lake Champlain issues. And finally, not to mention the University of Vermont, the State University of New York at Plattsburgh, and other academic institutions, as well as the numerous non-governmental organizations that serve on the various committees and work groups that form the backbone of the Basin Program. And I can't forget to thank the New England Interstate Water Pollution Control Commission, NUIPEC, for serving as the host institution for the Basin Program, providing financial administration and program oversight. That's a lot of thanks, and there's a lot of people involved in making progress in Lake Champlain. Lake Champlain is a national treasure, and restoring it has been a priority for EPA for a very long time. This goes back to 1990 when Congress approved the Lake Champlain Special Designation Act, which created the Lake Champlain Basin Program. EPA, the Basin Program, ANR, and Vermont communities have been hard at work since then to reduce phosphorus pollution and clean up the lake. For many years, we struggled to find resources, and progress was slow. We all did the best we could with what we had, but we weren't seeing the lake recover as quickly as we wanted to. That picture changed when Vermont passed Act 64 in 2015 and created the Vermont Clean Water Initiative. That step created new regulatory tools, new funding streams, and new momentum for the restoration of Lake Champlain. In 2016, EPA approved an updated cleanup plan for the Vermont portion of the Lake Champlain Basin, called our Total Maximum Daily Load, that established the amount of phosphorus pollution that needed to be reduced to restore water quality in the lake, and an accountability framework with specific actions for Vermont to take to mark progress. Since 2018, Congress has appropriated funding to the Lake Champlain Basin Program to support implementation of the TMDL. And last year, EPA issued a report card to Vermont recognizing the successful completion of all 28 key actions in phase 1 of the long-term cleanup plan. We congratulate Vermont on that hard-earned achievement. This recent State of the Lake report confirms that our work towards the restoration of Lake Champlain is having a positive impact across the basin. The purpose of our work is to meet the goals of the Clean Water Act so that Lake Champlain is fishable, swimmable, and drinkable. Reporting in the State of the Lake shows that 17 of Lake Champlain's public beaches were open 97% of the time from 2018 through 2020. And accounting by the Vermont DEC shows that there's progress towards reducing phosphorus contribution towards meeting the total maximum daily load. The Lake Champlain Basin is also an important habitat for thousands of native species, including more than 70 threatened and endangered fish and wildlife species. The State of the Lake shows us that restoration and habitat work have helped sustain the wild lake trout population, reducing the need for stocking, and that hard-fought efforts to keep recent aquatic invasive species threats at bay have been successful. Despite these improvements, the report shows that there is still work to be done. Cyanobacteria blooms continue to impact recreation in closed beaches in warmer months, and chloride levels continue to increase over time from runoff or road salt and de-icing compounds. And as temperatures continue to rise, a new metric in the State of the Lake found that Lake Champlain is freezing over less often than in the past. While it froze nearly every year in the early 1900s, the lake currently freezes about once every 4 years. It will be important over the coming years to track the impacts of climate change in the basin, to better understand its impacts to water quality, recreation, agriculture, and on our species diversity, habitat, and ecosystem. EPA is also proud to work with the Lake Champlain Basin Program and its partners as they strive to ensure inclusion of traditionally underserved and indigenous communities in lake-related programs across the basin. EPA will continue to support these vital efforts by providing funding for the Lake Champlain Basin Program to support local projects to reduce pollution in the lake, educate and involve the public, better understand lake issues and new ways to restore its health, and keep citizens informed on lake issues. For Lake Champlain to fully realize its restoration potential, it's imperative to capitalize on our partnerships, especially when working across both state and national borders. EPA looks forward to continuing to build on these relationships and working together with our partners across the basin to ensure clean water, healthy ecosystems, thriving communities, and an involved and informed public. In closing, I'd like to thank the LCBP for having me, and I look forward to the rest of the event. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. Next, I'd like to introduce EPA Region 2 Acting Administrator Walter Mugden. Please go ahead and unmute your microphone and turn your camera on.
Thank you, Eric, and I'm delighted to be here with my colleague Deb Zarrow from Region 1. I'm Walter Mugden, the Acting Regional Administrator for EPA Region 2. Our region serves New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands, as well as 8 federally recognized Indian nations. I'm very pleased to be joining everyone today to highlight the progress that's been made to protect and restore Lake Champlain, which is such an important resource for so many communities in Vermont, here in New York, as well as in Quebec. And it's great to be here with our exceptional partners at the Lake Champlain Basin Program, my fellow colleagues from EPA Regions 1 and 2, and our partners from the New York, Vermont, and Canadian governments. Joe Zalewski from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation's Region 5 office is here today. And EPA has long-standing partnerships with DEC on so many important issues, Lake Champlain, of course, among them. I'm also grateful that we could hear from Senator Leahy today. The senator has been really a tireless advocate for the environment and for Lake Champlain during his entire career. We're very lucky to be able to work so closely with this great environmental champion. We appreciate his support, as well as that from the New York congressional delegation who have been involved with Lake Champlain. And it's really also great news that the Lake Champlain Basin Program is placing a greater emphasis on incorporating environmental justice considerations into its programs, recreational opportunities, and grant awards to ensure that its work is representative and inclusive of all basin residents. Because Lake Champlain is so important to so many communities, the Basin Program's State of the Lake report is a critical resource to see what's working and what challenges still need to be addressed moving forward. And Deb Zarrow enumerated some of those, and the senator reiterated how important the report is. I'm especially heartened to see that this year's report shows progress by state and local governments and NGO partners in reducing the amount of phosphorus entering the lake and addressing invasive species like water chestnut and zebra mussels. One of the major roles that EPA plays in the efforts to protect and restore Lake Champlain is to provide funding and technical assistance to our partners whose work on the ground and in the water yields tremendous benefits for the lake's water quality and habitat. EPA's support to the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation enhances a technical assistance program to farmers in the New York portion of the basin that promotes agricultural best management plans intended to reduce phosphorus loadings to surface waters while sustaining on-farm productivity. Additional funding to DEC will help launch a pilot program to assist communities in New York to better manage their stormwater. Stormwater planning is a critical step in determining cost-effective approaches to mitigate negative impacts of stormwater and target pollution prevention. In a separate but related project, the town of Ticonderoga, New York, with EPA support, purchased separator and piping and contracted for project design to separate storm sewer and sanitary sewer lines. Finally, EPA also helped make possible a successful effort by Paul Smith's College to prevent invasive species from entering lakes and ponds in the Adirondacks through watercraft inspections by a team of stewards at several boat launches. So as you can see, there's progress being made on quite a number of important fronts for the benefit of Lake Champlain here in New York, as well as across the lake and north of us. I'm very, very proud of EPA's work to help make all that progress happen. Thank you, and now back to you, Eric.
Thank you, Walter. As many of you are aware, Lake Champlain is an international body of water, and we work very closely with our colleagues in Quebec. I would like to welcome Quebec's delegate to New England, Madame Marie-Claude Francoeur. Marie-Claude, it's wonderful to see you again. Please go ahead and unmute your microphone.
Bonjour à tous, merci Eric, Madame la Secrétaire Moore, Madame Provost, merci Dr. Howe. Tout d'abord, un grand merci de m'avoir invité à participer à cette rencontre et à y prononcer quelques mots. It is truly a privilege to be among you this morning. How I wish we were all together sitting around a table, or better yet, a picnic table in Crown Point, New York. Over the past year, whenever I thought about how far apart we were, I couldn't help but smile when I thought about how strong our relationship is nonetheless. If this crisis has shown us anything over the last year, it is the power of leadership. I do want to commend both Vermont and New York's COVID-19 response and your management of the pandemic. The strength and the depth of the relationship between Quebec and its partners was also underlined in the past year. This crisis brought us closer together than ever, and it is only by working together that we met the challenges we faced. Throughout the pandemic, we kept working on protecting our shared natural resources like Lake Champlain and continued our fight against climate change. Not only does climate change know no borders, it does not take a break, even when our world is at a standstill. Our two governments recently signed an agreement concerning phosphorus reduction in the Missisquoi Bay. This agreement is the result of hard work between our respective environmental teams and will lead to a cleaner Missisquoi Bay and a safer Lake Champlain. Madame la Secrétaire Moore, merci beaucoup. People often refer to Lake Champlain as the lake that separates our two countries. I beg to differ. We're so much stronger when we consider what unites us rather than what divides us. Lake Champlain links Quebec to Vermont and New York. It unites Canada and the United States in a common experience. Lake Champlain represents an opportunity to keep working together on protecting and restoring our shared waters, on fighting climate change, on brightening the future for the next generation. Quebec and Vermont share a long and proud history that has made us not only friends, but family. For the past 400 years, these waters have bonded our shared experience, shaping our history. Lake Champlain is an important part of our natural heritage. It is at the heart of the social, economic, and cultural life of the citizens of Quebec, Vermont, and New York. The Quebec government extends its thanks to the Lake Champlain Basin program for this report. This is yet another example of our cross-border collaboration in the management of our shared watersheds for an integrated management of water resources. Because of the vital information on the state of the Lake Champlain provided in the report, Quebec, Vermont, and New York will be able to precisely assess our ongoing efforts to protect this majestic lake for the benefit of the future and the populations. Thank you so much for having me today, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the program.
Excellent. Thank you, Marie-Claude. Now I'd like to offer an opportunity to the three jurisdictional chairs of the Lake Champlain Steering Committee to say a few words. First, I welcome Julie Moore, who is the Secretary of the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources. Julie?
Thank you, Eric. Good morning, everyone. Since my first State of the Lake report back in 2008, the state of Vermont has dramatically accelerated its implementation efforts throughout the watershed. From a total investment of state dollars of approximately $20 million per year at that point in time to more than $50 million a year for each of the last 4 years. This reflects our increased understanding of both the enormous value of the lake as a resource, as well as the investment that's required to properly steward and protect Lake Champlain. The states and the province have all been very active in identifying needs and supporting implementation and carefully tracking the outputs of this work, which includes measures like the pounds of phosphorus captured at wastewater treatment facilities, the number of acres with stormwater controls, the number of farms who've addressed runoff from their barnyards, miles of riparian plantings, the impact of the sea lamprey control program on salmon and trout, and pounds of mercury that are now properly disposed of. The State of the Lake report is an important touchstone, released once every 3 years, because it's a science-based assessment of the condition of the lake and provides feedback on the cumulative impacts of our collective management efforts. My key takeaways from the 2021 report include that nutrient concentrations in the main lake, which is fully 80% of the lake's volume, remain low and water quality remains excellent. At the same time, phosphorus concentrations in the lake continue to exceed our water quality standards in places like Missisquoi and St. Albans Bay, the Northeast Arm and the South Lake, despite significant efforts to reduce non-point source phosphorus loading. This for me highlights the importance of our continued work and focus. Lake Champlain continues to serve as a high quality recreation hub in the region with general lake-wide public access limited very few, very few days, as Administrator Zarrow had pointed out, due to water quality concerns throughout the traditional recreation season from Memorial Day to Labor Day. I was also struck by how our changing climate is clearly being reflected in Lake Champlain. I found figure 13 particularly striking, which documents that reduction in winter ice that Deb spoke to in recent decades and goes on to project that by 2050, the lake will most likely freeze only once per decade. This will obviously impact winter recreational activities on the lake and the ecosystem in ways that are not yet fully understood. I also took away the enormous value and reach of the Lake Champlain Boat Launch Steward program when it comes to slowing the spread of aquatic invasive species. The Steward program reached nearly 200,000 people between 2018 and 2020, and 60% of the boaters surveyed responded that they used spread prevention measures. This is much better than where we were during my first State of the Lake report, but also leaves lots of room for improvement to continue the work needed to reduce the risk of new invasives being introduced. I'm also a bit of a data geek, and so was interested in some of the new this year information that has not been included in previous reports, including an analysis of the ratio of nitrogen to phosphorus in the lake and how the beginnings of an assessment on how this might influence cyanobacteria blooms, a deeper dive into chloride concentrations, and a look at the impact winter road management practices have on water quality, and a graphic that shows current access for Atlantic salmon to their historic spawning range. And maybe the final piece of data I took particular interest in was around the incredible opportunities for public access throughout the basin, both in terms of conserved lands and the distribution of public reaches. The State of the Lake report was even able to put numbers to what we had known to be true, that there was a significant increase in people seeking outdoor recreation activities during the COVID pandemic. This is certainly a trend I hope will continue as all residents of the basin and visitors here look to seek ways to enjoy what is an incredible resource. In conclusion, I want to honor the work by the Basin program and thank Eric and his entire team for creating such a thorough, rich, and accessible assessment of our Great Lake. Congratulations on a job well done.
Thank you, Julie. Next, we have Joe Zalewski, who is the New York Department of Environmental Conservation Region 5 Director. Joe?
Thank you, Eric. The New York State Department of Environmental Conservation is a proud partner and member of the Lake Champlain Basin Program Steering Committee. For over 30 years, DEC has worked with the Lake Champlain Basin Program and partners on collaborative actions to address water quality and environmental challenges on this cherished multinational watershed. The triannual State of the Lake Report is a key tool for all who conduct education and outreach in the basin. With the release of this report, we celebrate the successes and positive trends we're seeing in the watershed, while also shining light on current and future challenges. Overall, Lake Champlain continues to have good water quality and meet the goals of the Clean Water Act with drinkable, swimmable, and fishable waters. Nearly 40% of the land area in the Lake Champlain Basin is conserved to some extent, providing ample recreational opportunities. Increased demand for public trail systems, boat launches, and other outdoor recreation spaces during the COVID-19 pandemic reinforced the need for conserved lands and public spaces. The last 3 years have seen major success stories for Lake Champlain habitats, which are home to thousands of native species, including more than 70 species of threatened and endangered fish and wildlife. Landlocked Atlantic salmon now have more access to historic river habitat, and passage for all aquatic species is being addressed through strategic culvert replacements. The documented success of wild lake trout reproduction has led to fisheries managers being able to reduce the number of lake trout stocked by 30%. Surveys indicate that more of boaters are taking precautions to prevent the introduction and spread of invasive species, and coordinated and intensive water chestnut management efforts are slowly reducing the extent of this invasive species in Lake Champlain. While we celebrate these milestones, we also acknowledge the work that still needs to be done. While phosphorus concentrations are often near or below targeted limits, further efforts are needed to reduce concentrations in shallow bays. Climate change presents challenges of its own, with the harmful algal blooms increasing during periods of warm weather. And a warming climate is also causing Lake Champlain to freeze less frequently, a trend that researchers anticipate will only worsen in the coming decades. We're fortunate to have the Lake Champlain Basin Program as a strong partner as we work to tackle these ongoing challenges, and we thank them for the hard work and dedication that has gotten us to this point today. The New York State DEC looks forward to continued partnership with the Lake Champlain Basin Program as we work together to protect and enhance the environmental integrity and social and economic benefits of the Lake Champlain Basin. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. And from the Quebec Ministry of Environment and the Fight Against Climate Change, Nathalie Provost, who's the Director of Analysis and Expertise for the Central and Southern regions of Quebec. Nathalie?
Bonjour, Madame Francoeur, Madame Zarrow, Monsieur Mugden, Julie, Joe. Merci beaucoup, Eric. C'est un honneur pour moi de participer à cet événement. La publication du State of the Lake Report nous sert un peu de portrait de famille. Il marque le passage du temps, présente l'évolution de notre situation. Et collectivement, ça nous permet de prendre du recul et d'observer la situation pour orienter adéquatement nos actions. Et comme nous le rappelait la déléguée Francoeur il y a un instant, la collaboration pérenne que les États de New York, du Vermont et le Québec entretiennent pour offrir à nos concitoyens un lac dont la qualité de l'eau est préservée, un milieu de vie de qualité et un patrimoine naturel est exceptionnel est très importante. Et c'est avec ces acquis en tête que nous avons intégré ces préoccupations dans un vaste programme que nous appelons la Stratégie québécoise de l'eau 2018-2030. The Quebec Water Strategy takes into account the 16 sustainability principles that Quebec adopted with its Sustainable Development Act of in 2006. All of these principles relate directly or indirectly to our water strategy. And when I read them again, I notice that they match perfectly with the Lake Champlain Basin Program objectives. In Quebec, coordination of integrated water resources management is the responsibility of my ministry. Integrated water resources management, in particular through watershed organizations and regional roundtables, encourage the participation and cooperation of all stakeholders. Again, Lake Champlain Basin Program is perfectly in line with our approach and policies in watershed management. Integrated water resource management by definition, requires joint work. For this reason, nous avons renouvelé l'entente sur la réduction du phosphore dans la baie Missisquoi. En effet, dans le cadre de la stratégie québécoise de l'eau, nous nous assurons que les préoccupations qui émergent au sujet du lac Champlain sont prises en compte non seulement par le ministère de l'Environnement, mais aussi par nos collègues des ministères de l'Agriculture, de la Forêt, de la Faune et des Parcs, des Affaires municipales, du transport et de la sécurité publique. Again, in English, just for our colleagues from the United States, in the Stratégie québécoise de l'eau, donc Quebec Water Strategy, we are working within the Lake Champlain Basin Program issues with our colleagues from the Agriculture Department, Forests and Wildlife and Parks Department, Municipal Affairs Department, Transportation Department, and Public Safety. So we are able then to reinforce the cooperation of all our organizations to improve the quality of the lake and the environment of Lake Champlain. So, dans cette quête, le rapport State of the Lake agit comme une boussole et guide nos actions, cible nos priorités. Plus tard, M. Howe nous en parlera. Nous savons que la baie Missisquoi présente de réels défis d'eutrophisation liés à la concentration de nutriments dans la baie. C'est pourquoi le Québec et le Vermont ont souhaité poursuivre leur collaboration pour y réduire le phosphore. Et je termine en exprimant ma joie de participer à une rencontre qui démontre l'intérêt de toutes les parties impliquées dans la préservation des bassins versants du lac Champlain et de la rivière Richelieu. Nous savons qu'ils constituent pour nous et nos concitoyens une richesse que beaucoup nous envient dans le monde et nous nous engageons à les préserver non seulement pour les générations futures, mais aussi pour nous, maintenant, après cette longue période d'inquiétude liée à la pandémie. Bon été à tous. Et merci beaucoup à toute l'équipe du Lake Champlain Basin Program, sans qui cette rencontre aujourd'hui n'aurait pas été possible, mais qui nous permettent à très long terme d'assurer une qualité de travail et une pertinence de notre travail très importante. Merci beaucoup à tous et merci beaucoup, Eric, à toi et à toute ton équipe.
Merci beaucoup, Nathalie. Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for your words and for your support for Lake Champlain. We very much appreciate our partnership with all of your organizations. And protecting and restoring a lake, it's in its basin, it requires work from all sectors, from government, from communities, and from the individuals, the residents and the tourists, the visitors to the basin. And it will take collaborative work across all these sectors to help us achieve our goals. This report is oriented around the Basin Program's four high-level goals for Lake Champlain. The report begins with the clean water section, which provides a picture of the water quality of the lake, including nutrients, mainly phosphorus, and cyanobacteria or blue-green algae, and other water quality elements. The next segment of the report focuses on healthy ecosystems. It includes information on sea lamprey wounding on our lake trout and Atlantic salmon, the status of aquatic invasive species in the lake, and more. And in the third section, Thriving Communities, we will review components of work that is focused on connecting the health of our communities to the health of the lake. And then finally, the informed and involved public section of the report looks at educating our community members of the basin about the lake issues. As you heard from a few of our speakers, we have a host of new information in this report that we have not included in previous versions of the State of the Lake report. In this one, we're looking at relationships between nitrogen and phosphorus and cyanobacteria blooms, and also chloride trends in the lake. We have a cool new forecast, modeling forecast for ice cover or freeze over trends in the lake, Atlantic salmon habitat access, and also public access. This report, the purpose of this, the indicators of this report illustrate the current status of 9 different indicators, and then also the long-term trend for each of those indicators. Following the indicators, we provide a summary of the state of the lake, which is oriented around the 5 basins of the lake and the Basin Program's 4 goals for Lake Champlain. 4 of our staff are going to provide some high-level messages for the rest of the program today, which are aligned with those 4 goals. We'll provide an opportunity at the end for participants to ask questions. We also will be providing follow-up presentations tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. that will take a deeper dive into interpreting the messages in the clean water and healthy ecosystem segments of the report. Please reach out or contact us if you need a link to that Zoom webinar tomorrow. It is different than the one that we're using today. We will take questions at the end of these presentations today, but please go ahead and load your questions into the chat as they come up, and we will address them after the final speaker. And for those of you who are here with the media, please, even if you're not going to ask a question right away, please go ahead and identify yourselves in the chat and the group that you're with today. First, I would like to introduce Dr. Matthew Vaughn, the Basin Program's Technical Coordinator, who will discuss key messages from the clean water section of the report. Matthew, go ahead.
Thanks, Eric. Clean water in Lake Champlain is critical to the diverse habitats and working landscapes of the region. The rain and snow that falls on the Lake Champlain watershed feeds 14,700 miles of streams and rivers that deliver more than 2 trillion gallons of water to the lake each year. Streams and rivers also carry vital nutrients, organic material, and pollutants that each play a role in the quality of Lake Champlain's water for drinking, recreation, and a functioning ecosystem. The U.S. Clean Water Act calls for the nation's waters to be drinkable, swimmable, and fishable. The Clean Water section of the State of the Lake report outlines where we stand on these goals and highlights several successes and remaining challenges. Now, first, Lake Champlain is a safe and reliable source of drinking water to about 145,000 people, or about a quarter of the basin's population. All public water utilities are required to monitor for 86 potential contaminants in their drinking water. Water from Lake Champlain rarely exceeds limits for any of these contaminants. And rivers and lakes in the Lake Champlain Basin are safe for swimming at most times and are enjoyed by thousands of swimmers each year. With about 600 miles of shoreline, 54 public beaches on the lake, and hundreds of swimming holes on its tributaries, there are countless ways to cool off. In this version of the State of Lake report, we improved our interpretation of public beach closure data. You will see in the report that 17 reporting public beaches were open about 97% of the time from Memorial Day to Labor Day since 2018. When a public beach is closed for health concerns, it's usually a result of a cyanobacteria bloom, sometimes called blue-green algae, or due to elevated levels of coliform bacteria. Now, substantial efforts have been made to reduce the number of combined sewer overflow events in the basin that can contribute coliform bacteria and potential pathogens to waterways. Since 1990, the number of CSO discharge points in the New York and Vermont portions of the basin has decreased from 87 to 31. Municipalities throughout the basin are working to reduce pressure on their stormwater systems by separating the sewer and stormwater inputs, eliminating discharge points, upgrading their treatment facilities, and implementing green stormwater infrastructure to reduce that stormwater runoff. The 2021 State of the Lake report includes improved interpretation of cyanobacteria monitoring data and explains more of what we know about the impact of the toxins cyanobacteria can sometimes produce. In the report, you will read that since 2013, 95% of routine visual assessments on Lake Champlain during the recreational season reported conditions free of cyanobacteria blooms. Cyanobacteria bloom frequency and intensity varies drastically among lake regions. The vast majority of reports from main lake locations indicate generally safe conditions, while cyanobacteria blooms are more common in St. Albans Bay and Missisquoi Bay, for example. Cyanobacteria blooms can sometimes produce toxins known as cyanotoxins that can be harmful if ingested by humans, pets, or wildlife. Although these toxins are rarely detected in Lake Champlain, it is best to avoid areas with active cyanobacteria blooms. The report also describes takeaways from cyanotoxin testing in several of Lake Champlain's public water supplies and in Lake Champlain fish tissue, which both show very encouraging results. We encourage everyone who enjoys the lake to educate themselves on what cyanobacteria blooms look like and to stay away from active blooms because cyanotoxins may be present in the water. Our laboratory testing shows that visibly clear water is generally safe to enjoy. The Lake Champlain Basin Program and our partners are working to address the root cause of cyanobacteria blooms in Lake Champlain by working to limit the levels of nutrients available for their growth. Phosphorus in particular is a key nutrient driving cyanobacteria blooms. An updated graphic in the State of the Lake report shows that many lake segments have phosphorus concentrations that are often near or below targeted limits. However, phosphorus concentrations in Lake Champlain's shallow bays, the northeast arm, and parts of the South Lake are often above these limits. Some of these areas have high phosphorus loads coming in from their contributing watersheds. Phosphorus delivery to Lake Champlain varies greatly from year to year and generally needs to be reduced to meet water quality goals. For the first time, the 2021 State of the Lake report compares measured tributary loading to establish water quality goals. Phosphorus loading to some lake segments, such as Cumberland Bay, has been at or below its established limit, while phosphorus loading to other segments, such as Missisquoi Bay, has been well above its limit. Now, reducing phosphorus loading is critical for the future of Lake Champlain's water quality. Two new graphics in this report explain important changes we've seen through 3 decades of monitoring on Lake Champlain: the relative abundance of nitrogen and phosphorus in the lake, and the salinization of the lake as a result of winter road de-icing salt application. We hope these will be informative for those who want to learn more about the lake and how human activities have influenced its health. Clean water in Lake Champlain is a shared goal with wide support. I hope you will look at a copy of the State of Lake report and learn something new about the lake we love. I'd now like to introduce Meg Modley-Gilbertson, who will provide an update on the protection and restoration of Lake Champlain ecosystem. Meg, are you with us?
Meg, we're not getting your audio.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, you're good.
Oh, apologies. The Healthy Ecosystem chapter covers what we know about biological diversity and ecosystem function and the role that aquatic invasive species play in the watershed. The basin is made up of rich and diverse habitats, and 40% of the land mass in the basin is conserved and protected from development and exploitation. Our watershed is home to thousands of native species, including 70 rare, threatened, and endangered fish and wildlife species. The greatest threat to habitat and species diversity includes fragmentation, climate change, human pressures, and aquatic invasive species. Native species rely on intact and functioning habitats, such as forests, floodplains, and wetlands. These habitats provide invaluable ecosystem functions, including nutrient cycling, sediment retention, and water and air purification. The basin is home to a number of threatened and endangered species, including the spiny soft-shelled turtle, lake sturgeon, the common tern, and mud puppy. And protection of the critical habitat has supported these species and the recovery of the common loon and the bald eagle. Climate change and invasive forest pests are putting pressure on forested habitats. Northern hardwood species are threatened by warmer and drier growing seasons. 2 new invasive forest pests, the emerald ash borer and hemlock woolly adelgid, have recently been detected in the basin. Their impacts kill trees quickly, causing erosion and water quality impacts. Air temperatures are rising and the lake is freezing over less often compared to the turn of the 20th century. In the early 1900s, the surface of Lake Champlain froze nearly every year. Currently, the lake freezes about once every 4 years, and modeling suggests that by 2050, the lake may freeze over just once per decade. The impacts of climate change on habitats, fish, and wildlife are more difficult to measure. Lake Champlain anglers continue to catch record-sized fish and come from near and far away to recreate on Lake Champlain. More research is needed to better understand the status of fish populations in the lake. The University of Vermont is conducting a Lake Champlain fish monitoring project to better understand the status of forest fish, such as smelt and alewife. This report highlights a great fish success story. In 1900, there were not enough wild lake trout to sustain the population in Lake Champlain. Biologists have recently found multiple age classes of wild lake trout, which informed a management decision to reduce stocking into Lake Champlain by 33% in 2022. This will help to maintain a healthy balance between wild and stocked lake trout and their forage fish base. A new figure included in the report illustrates Atlantic salmon access to their historic river habitat. While more work is needed to restore access on the Saranac and Missisquoi rivers, access is good and many groups are focused on assessing dams for removal and replacing culverts for improved passage for all aquatic organisms. Sea lamprey are a parasitic eel-like fish that feed on Atlantic salmon, lake trout, and other sport fish in Lake Champlain. Sea lamprey wounding rates on lake trout fluctuate and recently have been well above the goal of 25 wounds per 100 fish. Wounding rates on Atlantic salmon are often much closer to the target of 15 wounds per 100 fish. Management approaches for sea lamprey primarily target larval and spawning life stages of this eel-like fish when it's in the rivers. Aquatic invasive species remain one of the greatest threats to the lake's fishery. Invasive zebra mussels continue to filter huge amounts of water and deplete the availability of plankton from the food web. Alewife are displacing native smelt, and the newest invader, a crustacean called the fishhook water flea, is a voracious predator that is impacting the phytoplankton community and fouling anglers' fishing lines. It is the 51st known non-native and invasive species detected in the lake. The primary pathway for aquatic invasive species introduction to Lake Champlain is through canalways and overland on boats and trailers. Most bodies of water in the basin are free of aquatic invasive species and require monitoring and protection. While Lake Champlain is a source of invasive species for other bodies of water in the region, there are many invasives that threaten to invade Lake Champlain, such as the round goby, hydrilla, and quagga mussels. The Lake Champlain Basin Program and Adirondack Watershed Institute watercraft inspection data show that most common water bodies visited prior to launch into Lake Champlain are home to non-native and invasive species that are not yet present in the lake. Investment in education and outreach and spread prevention focuses resources on managing the pathways by which aquatic invasive hitchhikers can move across watersheds with human assistance. Hydrologic barrier alternatives on the Champlain Canal are being studied, and watercraft inspection and decontamination programs are intercepting aquatic invasive species from entering and leaving the lake. Once invasive species become established, they can be challenging and expensive to contain and manage. Water chestnut management continues to be successful at reducing the percentage of lake area covered by this invasive plant at the southern end of Lake Champlain. The invasive plant has been found by lake users at a few sites in the northern sections of the lake where it is being managed successfully. There are many steps we can take to protect the basin's habitat and species. We can plant native species in our gardens. We can never release pets or aquarium plants into the wild, dispose of our bait properly, use local firewood to prevent the spread of forest pests, and clean, drain, and dry our boats and equipment to prevent the spread of invasive species. I would now like to introduce Jim Brangan, our Cultural Heritage and Recreation Coordinator, to provide an overview of the Thriving Communities chapter of the report.
Thank you, Meg. The last 16 months have certainly shown that New Yorkers, Vermonters, and Quebecers have an appreciation for our natural world. The coronavirus changed almost everything in our lives, but the one constant was the great outdoors and nature. When the gyms and fitness centers closed, we flocked to the forests and fields for socially distanced exercise, recreation, and most importantly, rejuvenation. Our public lands offered a place of refuge from home confinement. Parking lots and trailheads were filled to capacity. Luckily, almost 40% of the Lake Champlain Basin lands are conserved. Those places provided a setting for hiking, mountain biking, bird watching, camping, hunting, and fishing. They were a means of escape from an invisible threat that we didn't fully understand. The Adirondack Park, Green Mountain National Forest, Missisquoi National Wildlife Refuge, dozens of state historic sites, parks and forests, and hundreds of municipal and nonprofit lands provided a safe haven in those troubled times. Those public lands were set aside generations ago to encourage reforestation, prevent erosion, and enhance wildlife habitat. Last year, they served us in a way very few could have guessed the last time the State of the Lake report was published. They became a means of escape, a pressure valve, a respite. The reported use numbers from last year are staggering. The Adirondack High Peaks experienced a record number of hikers with 111 summiting Mount Marcy, the basin's highest peak, every day in July and August. Vermont's Green Mountain Club reported that trail use climbed over 35% over previous years. Our public campgrounds served as vacation destinations. Vermont and New York state campgrounds reported daily visitation numbers in 2020 like those in 2018. While this doesn't sound remarkable, you should remember that most state facilities were at 50 to 75 capacity for the season. It was no different on the lake. Once summer hit, our boat launch stewards went into overdrive. In 2020, the boat launch stewards on Lake Champlain spoke with a record number of boaters. The boat launches were crowded. Boats themselves were in short supply. Kayaks and canoes seemed almost impossible to find. It is heartening to know that more people than ever used our lakes, rivers, and public lands last year. While some of the problems associated with recreational use were amplified, like overcrowding, trail erosion, and waste along the trails, the increased use is an opportunity to instill ethics and practices for healthy landscapes and improved water quality. Enabling an appreciation for our resources can build a better understanding of those resources. Appreciation and understanding inevitably leads to stewardship. The Champlain Valley National Heritage Partnership, a component of the Lake Champlain Basin Program, has worked for the past 15 years to help Vermonters, New Yorkers, and Quebecers make those connections. Called the CVNHP for short, our National Heritage Area has led efforts to showcase our three interpretive themes. In 2018, the CVNHP highlighted the Corridor of Commerce interpretive theme by supporting projects that focused on commercial, transportation, and industrial innovations in the Champlain Valley. In 2019, we worked with the partners to celebrate the International Year of the Salmon under the auspices of the Conservation and Community Interpretive Theme. Unfortunately, our efforts to mark the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote in the United States, were stifled last year due to COVID. However, like the suffrage movement itself, our partners are celebrating the 101st anniversary this year. Of course, the suffrage falls under the CVNHP's Making of Nations theme. The CVNHP has awarded 195 grants totaling $1.3 million to programs that support our management plan goals, objectives, and themes. Those grants have not just enhanced the understanding and appreciation of our cultural and natural resources, they've also generated $2.4 million in match. 21 of those grants, totaling almost $200,000, went to projects that researched, interpreted, and showcased Native American history and culture. The Lake Champlain Basin Program has long acknowledged the history and culture of these indigenous nations and recognizes that we're all stewards of our natural and cultural resources. Let's take the lessons we learned in 2020 about working together, acknowledging science and performing our civic duty to better collaborate in protecting our aquatic, natural, and cultural treasures. Please allow me to introduce the Lake Champlain Basin Program's Outreach and Communication Coordinator, Colleen Hickey, who will talk about the informed and involved public section of the State of the Lake Report.
Thanks, Jim. So how do we inform and involve the public? Well, we is the operative word there. We are all of the organizations that work on behalf of the Lake Champlain watershed. Before we finish today, I'll ask you a favor and call me on it if I forget. So how do we inform our audiences? We choose to use target audiences, those that offer a multiplier effect. In other words, let's take teachers, for example. They are my favorite target audience. We collectively train teachers. We bring them to farms, to fields, to wastewater treatment plants, up to the mountains, and wading through the streams and rivers. They get excited. They are excellent adult learners, and they love to share their knowledge with their students. Students, on the other hand, suck in this knowledge. They share it with their families and friends, and then they showcase that knowledge in authentic learning events, such as the World Water Day celebration that we host every spring. It's really hard to say no to a fifth grader who has just stocked a local brook with baby salmon, or who has walked on the grounds that were used during the American Revolution. They are a powerful force to be reckoned with. A couple of the other target audiences that offer a real big bang for the buck are marina operators. We collectively train marina operators in the spring on lake issues, on navigation aids through the Coast Guard, and on other updates. They in turn use that knowledge and share it with the thousands of boat owners who rent slips in the marinas. Realtors are another key target audience. Sea Grant and a number of other partners train them every year on septic system maintenance, on the importance of planting local native plants, on how to protect the shorelines. They in turn reach tens of thousands of potential clients that they are trying to sell a house to. It's a great process. Jim already mentioned the cultural heritage organizations who select an annual theme, and they weave that theme through as many as 20 organizations each year, bringing in that we factor again. We are teaching and offering this information to the public together. So that's inform, but how do we involve? We certainly don't do it on our own here at the Basin program, but we work with watershed groups and conservation districts and land trusts and more. More than 100 on-the-ground projects are completed every year by these organizations. They are literally planting thousands of trees along the streams and rivers. They're literally in the field helping homeowners understand how to reduce the sediment that's running off their gravel driveways in the upper elevations. And they train water quality volunteers on how to look for cyanobacteria and how to collect the samples for E. coli using scientific protocols. And then this data, once collected, helps inform recreational users about how safe the water is. Back to the boat launch stewards for one more minute. Julie mentioned that 60% of the stewards on Lake Champlain, or rather 60% of those who use the launches on Lake Champlain have said that they clean, drain, and dry their boats or take other preventative spread actions. Wouldn't it be great if we work with the media enough during the next 3 years to get that number to bump up to 70% by the time the next State of the Lake report is released? It's an awesome opportunity. So here's my favor for you. The next time you visit Lake Champlain and you're on the shoreline, I want you to look behind you. That's right, turn your back to the lake. Take a look at what the landscape is bringing down to the lake. What's the first 500 feet look like? What's the next 1,000 feet look like? Are you familiar with the neighborhood above that? Do people have storm barrels? Do they implement rain gardens? Do you see any runoff that should be fixed? What about the communities that are 3, 4, and 5 towns up in the watershed? 14,000 miles of streams and rivers drain to Lake Champlain, bringing more than 2 trillion gallons to the lake every year. It's not just water, it's the pollution that water brings with it that we're concerned about. We need more stewards in the upper reaches of the watershed to slow it, sink it before any pollution reaches the lakes and rivers. If you're not a steward already, please consider taking stewardship actions in the next 3 years. And lastly, I'd like to remind folks that in 2022, we'll be celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Clean Water Act. It's a great opportunity to share these stories. What's being done in your local community? What still needs to be done? If the media can help us pull those partners together, that would be excellent. We know where the stories lie because we know what 100 projects have been implemented on the ground. These folks want to share their stories with you. So while we use target audiences, our media partner reaches the masses. You really do, the masses of people. So let's work together to share our stories. Thank you very much. And Eric, we'll turn it back to you.
All right, thank you, Colleen. So that wraps up the formal presentation portion of our agenda for the day. As a reminder, Matt and Meg will be providing a deeper dive into some of the graphics and messages in water and helping you with these sessions of the report. All right, so on to questions. Let's take a look at some of the questions that came in through the chat first. Ryan, what do we have?
Okay, we had a number of questions from Pat Bradley. I'll go ahead and ask those first. His first question was, does anything in the report help as the drought continues?
All right, so we don't have anything specific in the report that would cover or interpret drought in the lake right now. Matt has looked at some precipitation trends for the lake and the basin, but we haven't really been able to convert that information into something that we can include in the State of the Lake report yet. And I'll let Matt explain that in a minute. There is, Pat, as you know, there is a study happening right now that'll be wrapping up next year, sponsored by the International Joint Commission that is looking at flooding in the Lake Champlain Basin and the Richelieu River corridor in Quebec. And they are still still working through some of their modeling work, but they have some preliminary results that suggest that precipitation will increase over the next couple of decades here in the region, but that evapotranspiration or evaporation from the lake, water evaporating from the lake, will actually increase more. And so even though we'll have more water coming in from precipitation, we'll actually have more exiting through either through the Richelieu River or and also through evaporation. So the water supply or the lake levels may actually continue to decrease to some extent. That's again modeling forecast, not actually concrete measure data, but that's what some of the folks looking at water supply in the basin are looking at. Meg also, I think I saw Meg answered your question to some extent in the chat. Matt, did you have something else to add?
Sure, Eric, thanks. And it's a great question. But yeah, just to reiterate what Eric said, we are already seeing the effects of climate change with more intense and more persistent rainstorms, and at the same time, more pronounced and extended or prolonged drought periods. I'll point out that a lot of the work that the Basin program and our partners do have several co-benefits, things like restoring floodplains and wetlands, and implementing tree plantings along our river systems and throughout the watershed. That will not only reduce the loss of nutrients and other pollutants to the lake, but it will also provide shading to our rivers and streams that will help reduce the impacts of drought on our wildlife. As well as improving habitat connections for aquatic species that can have more access to cool water habitat. I'll also point out that drought conditions are also the conditions in the lake where cyanobacteria blooms sometimes might pop up, and the work we're doing to reduce nutrient levels should also help with that as well. And yeah, Meg pointed out some really good tips for things you can do at home to conserve water during drought periods, like fixing leaks, using a rain barrel, mowing your lawn at 3 inches or higher to maintain a good root system so you don't have to use as much water, and planting drought resistant native species. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Matt. Ryan, what else do we have for questions?
Okay, Pat also asked, Senator Leahy recently got record levels of funding for Lake Champlain. What areas in the report will it help move forward most, and what new initiatives will you be able to implement?
Great question, Pat. So the upcoming budget cycle will be determined by the steering committee each year, and for fiscal year 21, federal fiscal year 21, we will be supporting a number of new research projects, but also we'll be putting out a lot of money, close to $1 million, for large boots on the ground implementation projects. So projects that will directly address phosphorus pollution from urban areas, suburban areas that deliver or send phosphorus and nutrients to the lake. We also are going to be looking at invasive species work through a collaboration or partnership with Lake Champlain Sea Grant to build an invasive species information system for Lake Champlain that mirrors one that's been used by the Great Lakes for quite a while and is very successful for them for sharing information for invasive species management purposes. And we also will be engaging in a number of new education and outreach programs. So it's, a lot of the work will address phosphorus as it frequently does, is one of the highest priorities in the Basin program's budget each cycle. We also will continue to have, as I think either Julie Moore or Administrator Zarrow mentioned this morning, funding dedicated to implementing Vermont's total maximum daily load for phosphorus reduction on that portion of the basin as well.
Great, and we have one more quick one from Pat. How are ARPA funds providing momentum to the indicators, if they are at all?
So that is another good question. One that I may actually push over to our partners in the States. I see Julie had to drop off. Joe is still on. The ARPA funds go directly to the states or other local governments, not to the Basin program. So it'll be up to them to determine how and where those ARPA funds are distributed across their various programs. Joe, are you able to answer that for New York? There you go.
Yeah, no, I don't know the answer to that, Eric. I don't know if our federal partners in
Okay.
Region 2 could assist.
Fair enough. Walter, I see you're still on with us. Are you able to respond?
I'm going to have to defer to my colleague, Mario Paula, who is on the line, and maybe he can provide a better answer. So I'm going to see if you can maybe allow him to unmute.
Sure. Ryan, can we promote Mario to a panelist? And while we're at it, I'll just give Neil, I see Julie also had to drop off. Neil came in. If you're still on, we might ask you the same question in a minute.
Looks like Neil did have to drop off. I'm not seeing Mario any longer either.
Okay. Region 1, Mel Cote. There he is.
Yeah, I'm not seeing you, but yeah, I'm here, Eric. I'm not involved in the program that would administer those funds. What I understand is similar to the state revolving fund grants that we make annually to capitalize the state's loan funds to support infrastructure upgrades and new construction, is that the projects would be essentially selected by the states, working off their intended use plans. Every several years, the states have to update their plans on their greatest water infrastructure needs, both on the drinking water and wastewater side. So that includes stormwater. Essentially, it would provide more funds to the states to do more of the projects that are on those lists. That's probably as much as I can say about that. But certainly, we're looking at that, the workload associated with that starting next spring when those funds will become available. But most of the burden of the work associated would fall on the states, and they have lots of lists of projects that currently have gone unfunded that these funds would be able to facilitate and expedite the construction of them.
I do. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Mel. And Mel is the EPA Region 1 delegate to Lake Champlain Steering Committee. All right. Pat, I know I don't think that directly addressed your question. Hopefully you got a head start for you. I encourage you to reach out to some of your colleagues at the state to find out more information. Ryan, do we have another question?
Yes, we do have a couple more. Marlon Hyde asked a similar question. It looks like we're making progress on the goals laid out in the TMDL, but that phosphorus levels in the lake are still problematic. Are there new funding resources LCB and its partners can leverage, perhaps from EPA, from ARPA, or others?
Sure. Okay. So I think we just addressed ARPA. That's at the discretion of the state or states. Other funding resources. So Congress is now able to use or has brought back an old tool that they had to direct spending. It used to be known as earmarks, now known as congressionally directed spending. And Senator Leahy and other members of our congressional delegation can use that tool to direct additional resources to Lake Champlain to help us address our goals. And I don't know if Tom Barry is on and would like, or any other members of staff representing our congressional delegation are on and would like to respond to that as well. But that is again, an additional tool that Congress has to direct funding to help prioritize or address high priority projects for the lake. All right.
I'm not seeing Tom on the list at this
Okay.
point. So we'll move on, I guess, to the next question, unless anybody else wants to chime in quickly. From Brandon Loomis, does this monitoring suggest a link between warming and trends in harmful algal blooms on the lake?
All right. Okay. This monitoring, are you referring to the long-term monitoring program? I think we'll assume that. Matt, would you like to take that one?
Sure, yeah, I'd be happy to. Thanks for your question, Brandon. So we know a lot about the impacts of climate change and what we've seen in terms of increasing temperatures. And there's a new graphic in the report that show that air temperatures in the basin have increased since they were we began measuring them many years ago, centuries ago. And we know that cyanobacteria blooms are more likely to proliferate when water temperatures are high, and especially when winds are low. We haven't done the research here at the Basin program to make that explicit link, but there certainly is a link. We've also done some new work in this report to show cyanobacteria bloom reports and data on cyanobacteria monitoring since 2013 in all the lake segments reported in the report here. And you'll see that from that data, there's no trend in routine assessments of cyanobacteria bloom since 2013 for every segment besides the northeast arm where there is a bit of a deteriorating trend there. However, again, as we see more increasing temperatures, unfortunately, we're probably going to see more pronounced and prolonged cyanobacteria blooms. The University of Vermont is at the forefront of this work to make this connection, this link, and to increase our understanding of this issue. They've done a lot of modeling and written some technical reports on how our water quality investments and working toward the TMDL will combat this pressure that we're going to see from climate change as cyanobacteria blooms continue the lake.
Thanks, Matt. Ryan, do we have any other questions in the Q&A?
No, that's all we have for now.
Okay. If folks have any other questions they'd like to ask orally, you can feel free to use the raise your hand feature function here in Zoom. If you hover your mouse over the lower part of your Zoom window, you'll see the yellow raise hand feature. Go ahead and hit that, and we can call on you, and Ryan can unmute you, and you can ask your question that way.
I'm not seeing any raised hands at this point. I don't know if you want to give it another minute for folks to have one more chance. We did actually just have a question come into the chat actually from Abigail Giles. I'm curious, what are some of the communities that the program has identified as underserved, and how are you working to better reach them and share data?
All right, thank you, Abigail. So we are working with a number of partners to identify underserved communities across the basin. We're looking at New American communities, at Abenaki, Wabanaki communities, and also low-income communities as well. This is something that we're still moving forward on, and we'll be developing a more concrete plan over the next 6 to 8 months or so. The Lake Champlain Steering Committee has dedicated some funding within the Basin Program's budget to directly address this work. So I don't have a concrete answer for you at this moment, but we are working with a number of partners to make sure that those communities are included in the work that the Basin program does. Meg, did you have something else to add?
Thanks, Abigail, for that question. And just to add a little bit to what Eric said, most of the way that we're interacting with these different communities is first we're identifying them, and then we're starting to have conversations. We're just reaching out to ask how different communities are interacting with the lake and the rivers, what kind of organisms they might be eating, if they're aware of some of the data that we're collecting about mercury in fish tissue or cyanobacteria blooms, and learning more about their interest in water safety, both in cold water and warm water situations. So we're asking the questions right now as to how these different communities are interacting with the water and the organisms, and how we can bring some of the data that we collect to the table and have it translated for them, and also asking if we're missing pieces of information that they would like collected so that we can better support how they interact with the lake.
Thank you, Meg. All right. Any other questions that you see, Ryan?
Abigail did have a follow-up to that question. Can you share the funding amounts dedicated for those efforts?
Yes. It'll be right now, we have $10,000 in the Basin program's upcoming budget that will go into effect October 1st. That's directly associated with that work that we were describing. I should add that we also have, as part of our annual grants programs, a number of projects that were recently awarded this past year that we'll be working with diversity, with underserved communities as well. That's actually a criterion that we included in our grant application process to award extra points to groups that are working with underserved communities, to give them kind of a boost in the competition process.
That,
did you have something else to add?
That looks like that's it for questions. I'm not sure if Colleen had another comment. She had her hand up there for a minute, but it's down.
And I'm actually good, Ryan. Meg addressed the issue of translation a little bit, and the Lake Champlain Basin program has done a lot of feature videos on our partnerships at the local level. And one of the first steps we also took was to make sure the closed captioning is ready to go to translation. So that took quite a bit of effort, and we got that accomplished this spring. So thank you for that push, Abigail.
All right, thanks, Colleen. All right, is this another question? It's a response. Okay, so Mary Jo Feuerbach from EPA also responded to the question about ARPA or funding sources, new funding sources. And Congress's appropriation to the Lake Champlain Basin program has increased dramatically in recent years. We have $15 million coming to the Basin program in federal fiscal year 21, which is a pretty significant increase. Just 5 years ago, we were a little bit over $4 million. And I'll add that in President Biden's budget, we are proposed, obviously it's not approved yet, but proposed at $20 million. We've been growing. All right, so that wraps up our presentation for the day today. Again, I want to thank all of the Basin program staff for your hard work and dedication in producing this report. This is my 4th trip through a State of the Lake report. It's always a huge lift, and this time it was another huge lift. We produced another fantastic report, but add to that the element of the pandemic and doing this all over Teams and remotely. It was just that much more challenging to get to where we are today and pushing this thing out the door. It's so much nicer to be able to meet downstairs and spill coffee over hard copies of the drafts of the figures and argue about the best way to present things. So this was a big lift, and congratulations to all the staff to get this report out the door. I also would like to thank the Lake Champlain Steering Committee and the members of our advisory committees and many additional colleagues who provided critical data to inform this report and help us with interpretation of the information. And thank you very much to all of you for your time and your patience with the technology, and most of all, for your interest in Lake Champlain. The report, as I mentioned, is available for download from the Basin Program's website, and hard copies will be available next month. Ryan can drop a link in the chat maybe one more time to access the PDF. And also, I think we have not a survey, but a link for folks to sign up to receive hard copies when they are available. You can just let us know through that link your contact information and how many hard copies you would like, and we can get those to you either by mail or by foot. So I encourage you all to take some time to review the report this afternoon, and please join us tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. We'll offer more opportunities for question and answers with staff and partners in that forum as well. Thank you all, and have a great day.